During years, I was finishing my conferences by "Nous sommes tous des journalistes." We are all journalists. And I really believe that the media battle has to become a real citizen broad movement, a popular movement. There will be no anti-war movement if you don't have an independent information movement based on citizens, men, women, all generations, all origins.
Hello, everybody. This is Pascal from Neutrality Studies, and today I'm talking to Michel Collon, a Belgian writer and journalist who wrote a lot of fascinating anti-war books in French, including The Left and the War, Analysis of an Ideological Capitulation, Ukraine, War of Images, and recently, October 7th, an inquiry into facts and lies. Those are the topics we want to discuss today. So, Michel, welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming online. And we just had a very short chat before, and you told me that you've been working on these topics for 35 years and that you've actually published already a lot in terms of books on it beyond what I just introduced. Can you maybe give me a rundown of all the things that you've been working on over these years?
Yes, it started in 91 with the first war against Iraq, which was already sold. I really used the word selling a war. I did not invent it. Experts as Bernays, very well known, but less known, Lassalle and Frank Raymond Jr., they explained how the CIA and these services need to use the advertising techniques and to sell a war just as if you sell a car or a soap or anything. And then I started with the first Gulf War, 91. Attention media, beware of the media, analyzing the media lies already in the first Gulf War, because the thing of the weapons of massive destructions, it didn't start in 2003. There was the first very well succeeded, and a lot of things. It was more spoken about the incubators, the famous incubators Cohesity, that was also in the book. And then I continued with the same media lies about the war against Bosnia. Also, the next one, Monopoly, NATO conquering the world, about the question of Kosovo. And there you find the same media lies. What is interesting is that when I published the first book, Attention Media, of course, the big newspapers here in France and Belgium, we were analyzing and showing how they had really manipulated the opinion. They were not happy and they refused to invite me. Some journalists at the Belgian public radio and television did invite me for very interesting discussion. And I was even invited to publish an article in the internal review of the RTBF, French public service radio television. So you see, the debate was open. And after the first Gulf War, it was known with the famous incubators, media lies, fake news, that the public had been manipulated. And then we saw a lot of journalists saying, oh, never again. Well, just before, we had Timisoara, where the paper I was working with was announced from the beginning, this is fake news. But then we heard, okay, never again. And then it happened again in Bosnia, in Kosovo. I don't give examples now. One of these books was translated into English. Well, two actually, those about Yugoslavia. And then I continued in 2011, Libya, NATO and Media Lies, Handbook of Counter-Propaganda, showing indeed that this war had been sold the same way. A friend of mine was publishing a book about Syria. Then in 2015, I published Am I or Not Charlie? And the main topic was the USA behind the so-called jihadic terrorism, and showing that actually using terrorists was a new and very brilliant strategy, started with Brzezinski, actually initiated before by the British, and we show the consequence of this. And then we published more recently Ukraine, the war of images. I mean, I have founded a collective Test Media International, which analyze the covering of the war and shows with a lot of images, the images that have manipulated the public opinion. It's a bit difficult to show like this. I can send you images if you want, but we show the images manipulating, and then we analyze what they didn't say, what they didn't show, the images they refused to publish, and also the manipulations behind, for example, Bucha and such things. And then more recently, with the same team, we have published 7th October, investigation about a day that changed the world. You could say it's the book about the fake news, beheaded babies, raped women, people killed massively because they were Jews and things like that, and what they have been hiding about 7th of October. And I'm doing this job because I think war is a tragedy, as we see now in Gaza and elsewhere. And people in the world, they hate war. They hate that people are suffering, that women and children are killed because of war. And of course, if the elite wants the people, the normal people, to accept war, they have to sell it for a good reason, a good purpose. And this, I made a synthesis of my investigation in what I'm calling the 5 principles of war propaganda. I mean, if you are the president of the USA or France or people like that, you may not say, I'm attacking this country because of oil, because of gas, because of uranium, because of resources, because of strategic position, or because this government I don't like and I want to overthrow a government. You have always to give a good, noble reason. We are fighting, we are the good ones, so we are fighting for democracy, for the rights of women, for against terrorism. That's very, very good way of selling a war, or weapons of massive destruction and things like that, always. So first, hide the economic interest. Second, hide the history. In all these regions, you had colonial powers. They have made the plundering of resources, they have brought poverty, and also they organized the famous divide and rule. The British were excellent for that, of course, divide and rule, but the French and the Belgians also in some areas. And you have to hide the history, how the colonial powers have manipulated to divide the people in an area and push for wars and push for conflicts. And they use, and USA, they are doing that now. They cannot send their troops directly. They were beaten. They have been defeated in Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. So it's not a good idea to send the troops. So they have to find local troops and use the famous divide and rule. The third principle of war propaganda is demonize. You may not say we are attacking a whole population. That would not be accepted. So we have to say we are attacking a leader, a dictator, or a group, because these people are very dangerous. They are monsters. They have terrible weapons. They are terrorists and so on. Demonize. And of course, for that, you need a story. Beheaded babies, very good example. Raped women, very good example that you can sell. The fourth principle of war propaganda is switch between the aggressor and the victim. You have to present always yourself as a victim or defending the victim. And Israel is very good for that. Israel is attacking since around 80 years, and Israel is always the victim. It's always aggressed. And you have a narrative presenting that. And the fifth and last principle of war propaganda is monopolize. You know, in a war, you have always 2 or 3 versions. So the public, they should, like a good judge, hear the one, hear the other one, and then makes an opinion. But that is not allowed because on television and so on, you may only hear the good ones and never the other version. So there is no debate. There is no real debate in television. There are some debates about how this war and how we should lead this war, and maybe we should stop this war and so on, but never do we have the right to make a war in Iraq, Yugoslavia, Afghanistan, Lebanon, Ukraine, Gaza, and so on. That is never debated in the mainstream media. And I'm insisting on that because since 35 years, as you can imagine, every time that we publish a book, we send it to the mainstream media. We send about 100 copies in France, Belgium, Switzerland, and so on. And the result is nothing. There were two exceptions in Belgium and in France. I was in some debates late in the night, but a famous show called Ce Soir ou Jamais, This Evening or Never. And I was invited from 2008 till 14. And then it was suppressed. The president, François Hollande, said, finished. And then I'm never anymore in television with these books. And they don't dare to discuss. Of course, they put the label, it's conspirationist, and that's finished. But they don't dare to discuss about this. And I'm insisting on this because I think the only force that is able to change this silence, this omerta, is the people themselves. So the books are made to educate the ordinary people to be aware of the propaganda war and to be active against that.
I find that fascinating and highly important. I mean, the way that in which the propaganda narrative is spun in order to time and again justify wars and actually drill it into the minds of people that are supposed to understand this is frightening. I had historians, a good historian, a colleague of mine at the University of Kyoto, throw away a drink and tell me that he will not listen to this stupidity when I told him that NATO in 1999 bombing Serbia was an infringement of international law. And he yelled at me, we must never allow Srebrenica. We have a duty to prevent that, as you know, and he positioned that as such an emotional, important thing that I must say, how does the media achieve to link like the defense of victims, as you said, with this emotional obligation to intervene and to make war again? How did you figure out how that works, like on the individual level?
The reaction of this professor is very typical and not a surprise for me. I hear that very often. And you are right to say he's motivated by emotion. He's not thinking anymore. Yeah. Where are the facts? What do the other side say? And what do I need to check? Just check. What would we say? I repeat, about a judge who would say to the one, I am listening to you, and to the other one, shut up. That would not be a good judge. Even if he has his opinion, his emotion, he must check the facts. And it's very typical that, and I would say more the intellectuals than the working people are reacting like that, also because they have been educated in this, we are the good ones, the West is the good one, and the West is always fighting for democracy. I was in Yugoslavia many times during the 90s. I made reports, I made a movie, and actually the conclusion of those two books I published, and there are other investigators, is that it was a big, big lie. The question of the famous bombs on the market in Markale in Sarajevo, all the UN experts and Western military said it was not the Serbians, the Serbs, it was the Muslims. Izetbegovic, the president of a Muslim, also recognized that. And he recognized that there were no concentration camps, that he invented it to get NATO intervention. And the question of Srebrenica there is a contest about that. There are some investigators, and I published books at that time in a so-called test media, showing that the first the problem around Srebrenica started with a Muslim criminal called Nasser Oric, who devastated a lot of villages around Srebrenica. Then there was a fighting. I will not deny that in this fighting, the Serbs won and probably some people were executed. It was a revenge, but it was not a genocide, and all experts show that. So they agree on that. Also, it is said in the Western media that Milosevic was a new Hitler and that he was responsible for the atrocities that were committed on the three sides in Bosnia in 91, 95. But he was abducted to the tribunal in The Hague. And finally, after he died, the tribunal said he was innocent of that. There were criminals on the three sides, and there were Serbian criminals indeed, but Milosevic was against that, and he took sanctions against these people, which in the West is completely unknown. So you see, what I'm saying to the people, don't believe me. Believe nobody just because I'm saying things like that. Check and compare the different versions, and don't buy the war that are really sold with lies, because it was a lot of consequences. Now there is more poverty in many of the ex-republics of ex-Yugoslavia, and most of the people say it was not a good idea to destroy Yugoslavia, and it's not good. These countries are very weak to resist to Germany and NATO and so on.
I just wonder, how is it? You said at the beginning that war is a tragedy, and the longer I study it, the more I come to the conclusion that it's not a tragedy as much as a system. It's a system that keeps alive the possibility of mass violence and a self-perpetuating process. And the media lies, but systematic media lies are, of course, and omissions are part of this. Because even if people like you then write these books, or we have now on Ukraine, we have the book of Ivan Kachanovsky and the 2014 Maidan Revolution of Dignity, as it is euphemistically called. And Ivan Kachanovsky showed in a very thick book the people who were shot from the side of the protesters. This was an instigated moment by people who wanted to create bloodshed and wanted on both sides people to die and wanted Western intervention and a change of hearts, and then the overthrow of this government. And that is known. It's not even, it's not talked about, but it's known. And the facts that you mentioned are talked about, are known, but not talked about. How is it possible that the media is so complicit in this?
What you say is presented in this book. Actually, it's interesting because this had happened before in Caracas. In Caracas in 2002, there is a coup against Hugo Chavez, and he's replaced by the leader of the patronal elite. And the Western media immediately say Chavez ordered to fire against the demonstrators who were coming to his palace, and then he was overthrown because of that. And I've been on the place. A very good French investigator, Maurice Lemoine, made an investigation and showed actually it was organized by snipers at the roof of the 7th, 8th in the building, and they shot from a long distance to the demonstration pro-Chavez and the demonstration against Chavez. And the idea was to provoke that. And this is the same in Maidan in 14, and friends told me it was the same in Lithuania also a few years before. So it's a classic by the CIA to provoke that. And it is shown in the book, The Maidan. And it's very interesting to listen to some US experts. For example, George Friedman, who is the leader of the Stratfor, which is the most famous think tank in the USA, very official. And he said in 2015, the Russians say Maidan was a coup, a US coup, and they are right. It was a coup. And then he explains, it is in a debate in Chicago, Council on Foreign Relations, and he explains it was a coup. We saw what the Russians were saying in Syria. That did not please us. It was very bad what they were doing. So we showed them that we could, and he says explicitly that we could organize instability in Ukraine. And it was a coup in Maidan. He says that. So he is completely destroying the official Western version that it was, indeed, it was in the beginning a popular demonstration against corruption. And indeed, the president was corrupt as every oligarch in Ukraine. And this one was a little bit more corrupt. But the demonstration was very quickly transformed by the Nazi militias, the Azov and so on, who organized to prepare a coup in accordance with Victoria Nuland, with the US and the CIA. And this was shown also in some secret conferences by Victoria Nuland and another one with Catherine Ashton, over that were intercepted by the Russians. It was published. It was not denied that the conversations were real, but it was never in the Western media, you see? So that's always, I'm saying the most important media lies is not what you say and what you manipulate, is what you hide. They always hide the most important things in every war.
You started this, you said in 1991, to your understanding, I mean, is the current version, how we see how the media is spinning, twisting, and lying about political events in order to justify war and warfare, is that a recent phenomenon to this extent, or how we are seeing it implemented, or is it just the latest version of what has been going on for 2,000 years?
I think war propaganda is as old as the war. It started with Jules Caesar, who were conquering France and Belgium and so on. And he was, at the same time, the journalist. I mean, he was writing a book about war in France, and he was explaining his ambition was to become emperor in Rome. So he was making the war, and he was sending his version of the war to Rome. So it started then. And you have a very good example. The First World War was actually, in my view, a war between several imperialisms who want to divide or redivide the world. And you had German imperialism, you had French and British imperialism, Russian too. And each side was saying, we are the good ones, and the other are the evil and the monsters and so on. In Great Britain, to sell the war to the population, they invented that the German army invading Belgium was killing babies, already babies, killing babies by plunging knives in the stomach and so on. Horrible stories. You have a very good Belgian historian, Anne Morelli, who published a book from a British Lord Ponsonby, and he invented this concept of war principles of propaganda. And that book shows how the British, and there are a lot of images, not photos at the time, of course, but drawings to show the atrocity of the Germans. So we had to make war. And the war was absolutely unjust, was absolutely an imperialist war from both sides. And the only good position was, we don't want war, we don't want to participate. And for that, Jean Jaurès was assassinated in France, and a lot of soldiers who refused were executed because they refused the idea of the war, the reality of the war. So it's not new. You cannot make a war and get money for that and get soldiers to be killed if you don't lie. The question is, of course, with the techniques, with the marketing, they improved the techniques, and now with artificial intelligence, we see that, but it's an old story, and you have to study the new forms, but you have to also to educate the people about the past, because now it's very sensitive. And if you come and say, well, in Ukraine, it's not exactly as you are told, you will get the reaction of your teacher there, very emotive, furious. Actually, people are afraid. This reaction, I analyze it as afraid. They are afraid to see that all they believe, the information they believe in, it's not true. Maybe you have to change your mind about that. That's very
Scary.
dangerous. And so I think it's very important that the people study, and it should start at school, study the examples of previous media lies, because there it's less in discussion and you can learn from the past.
The thing is, we know them, right? I mean, one of the most famous examples of war lies, at least in the German-speaking part of Europe, is Hitler's claim that Germany was attacked by Poland in 1939. And, you know, since the morning hours, we're shooting back. That's a very, very famous line. And the Germans, or a large part of the German public, is most easily convinced that, you know, you have to fight against Russia. We even have to send Taurus missiles, very important, support for Israel, because the poor Jews constantly under attack by evil Nazis, right? Middle Eastern Nazis currently. That's the framing. Why is it that this knowledge of the past doesn't translate into criticism about ongoing lies that are coming in and being accepted?
Well, you are right to mention that Hitler was, of course, applying these 5 principles of war propaganda. He was hiding that it was an imperialist economic war. He was paid by the big German business, Krupp, Thyssen, the steel, the chemistry, and so on, to have more space, more markets, more resources, and to plunder and the oil was already a big reason in that war. And if, of course, he was also using what I'm calling the 4th principle: present yourself as the victim, as the attacked. And indeed, the German people were attacked. So it was a sort of preventive war. We attack because we are in danger. And of course, this propaganda was very strong because Goebbels used in a very intelligent manner the new invention of the radio. And it was, well, the German population was suffering from poverty, from unemployment, from a lot of things. And the Communist Party was very strong at that time. You almost had a revolution in 19, a socialist revolution in Germany. And then the Hitler and the forces behind him had to find a responsible. And indeed, the foreigners were attacking Germany, so we have to make a preventive war. What you mention is, why are the people around us not aware with all these examples? I would say, first, do not speak about the people, because you have several categories. Some people are well conscious and aware, and they try to explain that around themselves, and it's not easy. When you go against war propaganda, it's not easy to talk about that, and we see how difficult is the discussion around Israel now. Well, it's less difficult than before, but it has always been a very difficult discussion, and I'm trying to help the people to better explain, better convince, better discuss. Do not discuss with emotions, discuss with facts and checking facts together and things like that. Then you have a lot of, a majority of the people who feel that they cannot trust the media. And you can see in the polls that a lot of people say, I don't trust the media. But in the same time, they feel in the trap about Ukraine and a lot in Syria and so on. So it's complex. And it's also normal. A lot of people don't have time to study that. A lot of people who are working, well, they have long journeys because before you were working in the factory or in the office, and when you got back home, it was finished and you had time for yourself and the family and maybe read, study, discuss, and so on. And now with these telephones, you never stop to work because your boss can call you or can send you, and you have to work in the evening, in the weekend. A lot of people in my country, there are a lot of burnouts because you work constantly. So people are tired. They come back from the office. They have to work, the children and so on. So you are tired. What you do, you look a little bit at the television, you see a good movie, and then that's. I don't blame them. I think we need to look how we are going to attract these people, to tell them, think about it, because for making war, they use your money, they use maybe your son or your daughter, and they provoke terrorism and so on. So be aware that good information is also your problem. And I think we have to find a way to attract the people in a very popular and simple way. For example, now, besides of the books, I'm producing videos. One format of video which is called La Minute Michel, the minute Michel. So it's less than 2 minutes, and I'm reacting about some event of yesterday, or some quote, or some post, and so on, or the speech of Macron today, and so on. And I'm trying to explain to the people what is hidden there and how they should analyze it. And that's sort because, I will never be invited anymore in television. And then you have to find ways to reach the people with the social networks and short videos and so on. But not only that, I really encourage people to read books, to study, because that's the best way to study and really deeply understand. Reading books, taking notes, making it your own, and so on, and be active in the discussion. I'm encouraging people to discuss not only with friends and people who already agree on that, but especially discuss with people who do not agree, who are influenced by the Zionists or the war propaganda, and and it is well possible. If you have a good method, if you keep quiet and calm, and if you discuss with the method, I think it's really possible.
Right, right. And in a sense, it's also dangerous that we start preaching to the converted, right? That we only discuss within the same group, and then the other group, the 80%, their narratives remain unpierced, unharmed. Yeah.
Yes, and you have the impression that things are good and so on, because if you talk with people who agree with you, it's nice, it's pleasant, but the real work is to convince new people.
I do that on this channel all the time. I only have people like you who agree with me, but it's a very, very important point. But let me ask you maybe about the how you interpret the current state of affairs in Europe, because what we haven't seen before, and I interpret it rather as a sign of weakness, is that for the first time, the European Union actually felt obliged to outwardly ban another source of information. Russia Today, Sputnik, it's forbidden to broadcast this. That's new. And actually Switzerland, and I'm usually very critical of Switzerland, but for once I must say, well done, they said we are not going to ban this because this runs counter to our understanding of liberal society. They phrased it like this. But the European Union, it's banned, right? How do you interpret this need to use brute force of law in order to prevent other narratives from bursting in?
You are right. It's a sign of weakness. They are telling us since years that they are the countries of human rights, freedom of expression, and so on. And then you have a media who is just explaining another version. You can criticize Russia today. I will not say it was perfect, but it was more balanced than all the Western mainstream media because they invited many times both sides. And it was more balanced. So it's a sign of weakness. Really, they, as I said, they don't dare to debate. And indeed, it was also a big manipulation by Ursula von der Leyen because it's not in the matters of the competence of the European Union. So they had to present it not as a media banning, but as an economic, not unfair competition and blah, blah, blah. So I think people should listen to other media. But more important, I think we have to build our own media, and Investing Action is a small independent media with big financial problems. We have a web page, we have a YouTube channel, we are publishing books, we have an investigation team about media lies, and we make a lot of debates and formations and so on. So it's a big work. We have some success, I would say, but there are some others in other countries, and I think we should more coordinate the independent media. There are very good things in the USA, like Gray Zone and so on. We should try to exchange experience, coordinate more, and produce something more coordinated daily. For example, the images that when you were not shown, that have not been shown to you, and we should produce something more effective to convince more people. But indeed, it's a sign of weakness. And the reaction, I published recently a very short video about Trump, and I said, I hate him and I like him. I hate him because he's racist, homophobe, against women and so on. He's horrible. And on the other side, I like him because he's telling the truth and he's showing that Biden, Obama, and Clinton and so on, they were all lying about the wars. And he also said, we are paying a lot of so-called independent mainstream media in a lot of countries. Well, it's wasted money. I will not pay for them anyway. So they were all running, we are finished. And he was showing to the people that the information they got was paid by the USA to manipulate them. So, of course, the Western media didn't comment on that.
Do you see any role, and by the way, I completely agree with you that a coordination also in independent media would be a great thing, and building something that that allows us to jointly counter this propaganda would be important. But do you see a role in of, how should I put it, like Western or Euro-American mindset as part of this? Because, like, what you just pointed out is this accepting that two things can be true at the same time. You can hate Trump and you can love him at the same time. You don't need to choose. You can accept that I can do both. I can accept that, the war in Ukraine is at the same time an aggression by Russia and provoked. I mean, these two things do not need to exclude themselves, but the narrative, the mainstream narrative, constantly forces us to choose. I mean, in the British media is the worst in this. They always, when it comes to October 7th, for instance, they always say, do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? First, you need to choose your side, and then you're allowed to say something, but you need to choose. And this strikes me as particularly Euro-American. Do you share that impression, or am I wrong?
Don't believe that only the British media were using that. In France, it was impossible for the people who had a little bit of sympathy or understanding for the Palestinians. It was impossible to come on radio or television. Before, you had to get a police interrogatory, and if you didn't repeat 3 times, I condemn 7th of October, I condemn Hamas, and so on, then you have no right to speak. I would say what we show in the book is first, it's not only Hamas. All the combatants of Palestinian side took part to 7th October, even if Hamas took the initiative and was directing. I mean all, which includes the FPLP, speaking in French, FDPLP, the two Marxist and not religious movements, PFLP and so on. They were taking part, and until now also. So it was not a religious action, it was an anti-colonial action. Second, this idea, do you condemn, is based on the lies of Netanyahu and his propaganda. Beheaded babies, fake news. Rape women, fake news. In Israel, everybody knows that now. But in the West, it is forbidden. It was a military action. And Israeli experts say it was brilliant. It was organized, it was planned, it was very well organized. And they took by surprise the military bases that were attacking Gaza since years, and that were, at the point of view of the international law, illegal. What is illegal is not attacking military bases, is the military bases occupying and attacking Gaza since dozens of years. That was a preparation of the genocide, actually. So I think that's the first point to be said. And then, indeed, you have to build. You said, what can we do in the West? I would stress the point that we are no more the center of the world. The battle of information is happening everywhere, and people in Latin America, Asia, a lot of the Arabic world, and Black Africa, they do not believe anymore the Western media and the Western version. Even about Ukraine, a lot of people in Africa and Latin America, it's your war, it's about you. And about this question of Ukraine, I think the good position was expressed by the late Pope Franciscus, who said, it was not good what Putin did, but I'm thinking about it, and I think Putin's reaction was provoked by the NATO, who were just like a dog exciting at the door of Moscow and so on. He was explaining a very good position. And so I think, you see, we have to organize a strategy. First, listen to the people in the South. Listen to their sources, listen to the victims, and all action in the West should be based on that. We are no more the center of the world. And the problem is, in the European left, unfortunately, you have a majority of people, even among the so-called revolutionary organizations, Trotskyite, anarchists, and so on, you have a mentality, we are the center of the world, our media say the truth, and the Western war against Libya or Syria or Ukraine is good, is right. And that is why, with my comrade Saoud Bamama, Algerian sociologist living in France, that is why we published the Left and the War, analysis of ideological capitulation. Unfortunately, since Iraq, Yugoslavia, Libya, and so on, in the left, I'm saying in the left, and I'm not speaking especially about the Socialist Party, because they became, for most of not the ordinary members, the leaders became part of the war apparatus. Unfortunately, even this so-called radical left is in each war saying, okay, USA not good, France not good, but the local dictator neither, and so on. And that is misrepresenting the reality. Okay, some countries who are directed by dictators. Okay, not always the case. Chavez was not, and some not. But that's not the problem. That's the problem of the local population. They have to decide who is the best leader for the country, but Gaddafi was not attacked because he was a dictator. He was attacked because he didn't want to capitulate in front of the multinationals, and he was starting to finance African independent development against the World Bank, against the IMF, against the chantage of the blackmailing of the Western multinational. Therefore, he was attacked. And we have to have this discussion. And if we want the progressive forces to be stronger in the defense of peace and to rebuild an anti-war movement who has unfortunately disappeared, we have to analyze this capitulation, and we have to make a lot of discussion with these people. First, don't believe your media. And second, listen to the people in the South and listen to the voice of independence. And then the problem of democracy will be solved by the population themselves after that.
It's a very, very good insight. But do you think that this is also, to a good level, a coordinated attack on the peace movement? Because, you know, it was in the end the peace movement in the United States that ended the Vietnam War. And we can see how after the Vietnam War, there was a conscious effort at not letting this happen again, right? Including like the harsh punishment of any kind of serious whistleblower. And I'm thinking of Edward Snowden. I'm thinking of especially Julian Assange. And these people were cracked down so hard, and that until now, in the public mind, they're basically, you know, they're pervert, exile, horrible people that we don't even really want to think about. That's the level of demonization that was done, and that was not the case with Mr. Ellsberg, right? In the and with what's his name, Milei, the journalist. Huh?
Seymour Hersh.
Seymour Hersh, of course, Seymour Hersh. That was not the case with them, and now it is the case, and we don't have these big whistleblowers at the moment. So in a sense, you can see how the war faction in Europe and the United States kind of learned its lesson and started to dismantle intellectually and operationally the anti-war movement, to the point where in the Ukraine war, the left is, and I'm a paying member of the Social Democrats in Switzerland, you know, they were pushing for weapons exports to Ukraine, pushing for it, and I'm disgusted at that. What's your thought about the issue of this being an active effort?
Well, you mentioned a lot of important points. First, I wish to thank very much to Julian Assange and his wife for the fighting, because it was very, very important. It was really a struggle for the freedom of being really informed, and I consider Julian Assange as a hero of our times, and there should be statues and places in his name and so on. We have to be really very, very thankful for that. Of course, the repression against journalism is much stronger now than it was before. The reason is this imperialist system is in a big decline, in a big crisis. I believe neither Biden, neither Kamala Harris, neither Trump have a solution. They don't know what to do. I see that as desperate efforts to maintain the US dominancy on the world, and they are doing contradictory things, and they have no solution. And we have the power, if we take coordinated action, if we form ourselves to destroy the media lies, we have really the force to change this relation and this system. I think the repression now of journalists is very strong. More than 200 journalists killed in Gaza. This famous Palestinian Christian Shirin journalist assassinated. No problem for the Western governments. Okay, kill journalists deliberately, no problem. Go ahead. So it's really, it became a death or life or death struggle this question of journalism. And I really think we have to fight for the freedom of information, which means not only protect Julian Assange, protect the whistleblowers, protect the journalists, but also attack the governments who are killing them, who are repressing them, make a lot of trials in court and so on, go to the justice in The Hague and so on, and build a counter-information network. And, you know, when I'm going in the street or in demonstrations and so on, a lot of people tell me, oh, we thank you for what you are doing, continue and so on. And I'm answering, I'm nothing if you are not also in the same struggle. And what will be decisive is not me, is you. To how many people are you going to talk? To how many media are you going to contest? And which actions are you going to make to counter this disinformation? I'm making conferences a lot of times, and during years, I was finishing my conferences by "Nous sommes tous des journalistes." We are all journalists. And I really believe that. The media battle has to become a real citizen broad movement, a popular movement. There will be no anti-war movement if you don't have an independent information movement based on citizens, men, women, all generations, all origins.
I absolutely agree. I mean, this is one of the most important places to fight the good fight, the cognitive space. And we have a lot of good people who did very good analysis, including you, but also like in Germany, Johannes Turgel, who wrote about, cognitive warfare being a actual discipline of NATO. They study this and they do this and they even talk about it on cognitive warfare, not just against foreign population, against your own population. They openly say so. The question to me, and maybe this is the last question, is how to organize it. Because if we, as soon as we build pyramids with structures, it's very easy to subvert them. You go in on top, you change get a few people changed, and then the entire thing falls apart. We've seen this with a lot of institutions that were supposed to be peace institutions, but now are more, defense analyst institutions. What's your idea for building a network instead of pyramids, or how do you think we best do this?
Well, it's complicated. I will not tell you I have the complete answer because it's a huge task. And as I said, we are small. We are a small team. We at Investigation had a financial crisis. We have support. We have more support, but we are under attack. And there is a lot of work. I think it's a really important responsibility to build international coordination. I think we should meet with representatives of good independent media in many countries, and we should meet not to make speeches and so on and then go back, but only to discuss how are we going to organize concrete coordination, concrete productions, and concrete promotion. For example, this book, Ukraine War of Images, it exists in English, and I would like to reach the English-speaking audience, but I have no support for that. We have no website. We have no way of promoting it. I'm sure I know there are a lot of good initiatives. The German writer you mentioned, I don't know. We should also bring that into other versions, French, Spanish, Arabic, and so on. So I think we should first organize a sort of coordination of independent media to make translations, to make promotions, to make that the actions are more circulating in other communities. And in my view, since image is now so important, the first production we should organize is a sort of popular daily TV journal showing the images that have been hidden in the Western media. You have images of Latin America, of Black Africa, you have televisions there in Mali, Burkina, and so on. You have people in Iran, in Lebanon, and others who are publishing images, and nobody sees that. So let's make first a short pools of exchanging the images that have been hidden, and let's organize an international media conference.
Michel, this is a fantastic idea, and I think I can even help with that because I'm working on an initiative with a German colleague to translate these talks. This talk will come out in 11 languages because he uses AI technology. We use AI in order to do voiceovers, and we could build this into something more, into more media exchange between the different language groups. Because yeah, you're right. At the moment, one of the problems is we're fragmented. We're fragmented within the language groups, but we have even more fragmented like across the language groups. So it's difficult to find each other. This is a good idea, Michel. Let's work on a conference. We are nearing the hour, so I have to let you go. But I would like to thank you very much for these very important ideas. This is very exciting to me.
Thank you for inviting me and for what you mentioned, and I hope you can help to organize this. We really need that. The enemy is well organized, but the enemy has a lot of problems inside. They are in moral crisis. Many people don't believe them anymore. So I think it's an historical moment, and the resistance in Gaza and what's happening in Africa, in Latin America, and so on is very important also for us in Europe, because poverty and exploitation are growing in Europe. We will have terrible crisis. We are now risking fascist movements and fascist governments in Western Europe. So it's urgent that we really get the information we need to fight for justice.
I absolutely agree. Everybody, the links of Michel Collon, where you can find him and his books, will be in the description below. If you speak French, a lot of them are in French. He has a lot of them also in English. Check out his work. Michel Collon. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.